Have you ever wondered if your actions today could shape the future of your family, your relationships, and your happiness? What if your choices today could bring you peace, or lead you down a path of regret and loneliness later in life? Welcome to a story that could very well be the wake-up call you need about the importance of trust, family, and the choices we make. Today, we're diving deep into a tale that reveals the bitter reality of a father's missteps, the consequences of his decisions, and the painful lessons learned in the twilight of life. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. First, never reveal your spouse's financial situation. Money, for many, is not just a measure of material wealth. It carries with it a deeply emotional significance. It can be the foundation of dreams and aspirations, but it can also be the catalyst for bitter conflicts, misunderstandings, and even the dissolution of relationships. I say this from a painful, personal experience. There was a time when I nearly lost everything dear to me. My family, my peace of mind, because of how issues surrounding wealth and familial bonds intertwined. It was a harsh and costly lesson, but one I carry with me to this day. I learned, perhaps too late, that some things are better left unsaid, even with your closest relatives. Sometimes, silence can be the best protector of harmony. In my family, I have 4 brothers and 1 sister. Each of us has carved out our own lives, but we are connected by the invisible threads of our upbringing. My wife and I, for the past 20 years, have lived in the bustling city, striving to build a future together. Meanwhile, the others have stayed in the countryside, where life seems simpler and more stable. They've built their wealth and comfort over time, and while they're doing relatively well, we, though we're not destitute, don't have the same financial cushion. We live modestly, scraping by on what we earn, and carefully managing the little savings we have. We're not rich, but we manage. Yet, this very stability became the source of my greatest misfortune. It started subtly, just a phone call now and then from my youngest brother. He'd asked to borrow money for a variety of reasons. Paying property taxes, car repairs, medical bills, the list goes on. Initially, I felt pity for him. I'd lend him the money without hesitation, assuming he'd pay me back when he could. But as time passed, the amounts grew larger and larger, and I soon found myself in a situation where I was giving and giving, but getting nothing in return. And what struck me as deeply unfair was how he seemed to have no trouble living a life of luxury. Every morning, I'd see him at a cafe, sipping coffee in the latest designer clothes. He'd take his family on occasional trips, living a carefree life. Meanwhile, my wife and I were pinching pennies, eating cold rice for dinner, stretching every dollar to make sure we could keep our heads above water. When my wife discovered what was going on, she didn't scream at me or accuse me of being foolish. Instead, she calmly said, "We worked hard for that money. We need to think carefully before lending it to anyone." Her words struck me deeply, like a cold splash of water. She was right. I had made a mistake, not just because I was lending money without discussing it with her, but because I had been enabling my brother's irresponsible behavior. I was not helping him. I was prolonging his dependence on me, and in doing so, I was undermining the values we had worked so hard to instill in our own family. There came a point when I had to refuse him outright. I stopped lending him money, hoping that he would understand. But instead of changing, his behavior became more desperate. He would tell me sob stories, claiming he was in the hospital or posting heart-wrenching tales on social media to guilt me into helping him. Each time, I felt the pressure to do the right thing, but deep down, I knew that the right thing was not to give in. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. By constantly bailing him out, I was not lifting him. I was enabling his self-destructive cycle. His debts grew, but so did his sense of entitlement. His lifestyle remained unchanged, and that's when I saw how dangerously close I was to losing my happiness and my marriage. It was my wife's quiet yet firm reminder that opened my eyes. Let it go. Each person must take responsibility for their own life. And with that, I realized the painful truth. I could no longer shoulder his burdens. Even though he was my brother, even though I loved him, I could not live his life for him. He had to face the consequences of his own decisions. Today, I have severed my involvement with him. I've stopped answering his calls for money. I've brought my mother to live with us in the city, prioritizing the well-being of my own family, and focusing on my wife, my children, and myself. I heard that he had to sell his house to pay off his debts. Part of me aches when I think of it. But I also know, deep in my heart, that this is the trial he has to face. We all have our burdens to bear, and some lessons can only be learned the hard way. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. The biggest mistake I made was talking too much, sharing too many details about our family's finances with someone who wasn't ready for that kind of information. I unwittingly gave my brother the impression that we were wealthy and that I could be a constant safety net for him. That was the first crack in our relationship. I should have kept our financial situation more private, guarding our peace and our future. Money matters are delicate. Sharing too much with the wrong person can create rifts and misunderstandings, even among the closest of kin. We must be careful with how we discuss our wealth, and with whom. There's a saying that resonates deeply with me. Do not judge a person by their appearance, for you can never know their suffering. Behind the outward stability of a family, there is often hidden struggle, sacrifice, and hard-earned success. What I've learned painfully is that you must protect what you've worked for, and not let others take advantage of your kindness. Offering help is one thing. Enabling dependence is another. And the most important lesson, helping others doesn't always mean giving them what they want. It means helping them find their way, so they can stand on their own feet. This, ultimately, is the greatest gift we can give. Second, do not casually share your weaknesses. The love between siblings is truly sacred, an unwavering bond that holds immense power and beauty. It's a connection that can withstand the tests of time, distance, and even personal flaws. But unfortunately, this love is also fragile, and sometimes even the most well-intentioned actions can unravel it. One of the gravest mistakes we can make is to share our weaknesses too openly or criticize our relatives, thinking it's for their good. It's a natural inclination to believe that honesty, especially with the people we care about most, is the right thing to do. We feel that if we reveal everything to our siblings, they'll understand us better, or maybe even help us improve. But in reality, this approach is not always the most loving or effective. Sometimes, it can hurt more than heal. Take, for instance, the following story, which I believe speaks volumes about this very issue. The older brother, frustrated with his younger sibling's habits, chose an unfortunate moment to air his grievances. A family dinner, the perfect occasion for warmth and connection, quickly turned sour. As the alcohol flowed, so did his criticism. You're the younger one, yet you don't listen to me. Why do you act so irresponsibly? His words were like daggers, cutting deep into his brother's heart. The younger sibling, who had always looked up to his older brother, now felt nothing but insulted. He couldn't help but think that the person who was supposed to be his protector and guide was now belittling him. The older brother, in his frustration, had failed to realize that his words, however sincere they may have been, came across as condescending and harsh. And just like that, a once close and trusting relationship turned cold. This story, though simple, is a powerful reminder of how easily we can damage relationships with the people we love the most. Time and distance can create gaps in how we think and live, and sometimes, without realizing it, we become strangers to one another. As we grow, we develop different perspectives and different ways of thinking, and we start accumulating experiences that shape us into independent individuals. And yet, amid all this personal growth, we must not forget that the people closest to us, our siblings, are also evolving. They too have their struggles, their triumphs, and their emotional landscapes that are often very different from ours. That's why, when we carelessly share our frustrations or point out their flaws, we risk hurting them deeply. Even the most harmless comment can be seen as an attack, especially when it touches upon something sensitive. Sometimes, the best thing we can do is simply hold back. It is crucial to choose our words wisely and think twice before speaking out, especially when emotions run high. Criticism, no matter how constructive we believe it to be, can make the other person feel judged or rejected. No one wants to feel as though they're constantly under the microscope, even if their intentions are pure. I think we all need to realize that in any relationship, especially with our siblings, we have to be gentle, patient, and tactful. True love does not come with the burden of constant judgment. As the philosopher said, be strict with yourself and lenient with others. This is not just a piece of wisdom. It's a mantra that can help us navigate our relationships with compassion and understanding. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than words. A few kind words of encouragement, and a gentle nudge in the right direction, can often do more than 1,000 criticisms ever could. We must learn to approach our siblings with empathy, to understand their struggles without judgment, and to be calm in their storm rather than another source of their frustration. If you notice your siblings' flaws or unpleasant habits, pause for a moment. Reflect. Is it truly necessary to address it? Will pointing it out create tension or help them grow? And if you do choose to speak, make sure it's at the right time, with kindness, and with a heart full of love. When you choose your words carefully, with a deep understanding of the other person's feelings, it becomes possible to communicate in a way that strengthens your bond rather than weakens it. At the end of the day, family is about love, understanding, and support. We all have our weaknesses, but it's how we choose to handle them that determines the strength of our relationships. We must remember that sometimes the best way to show love is to simply be there for each other, quietly, patiently, without expecting anything in return. Third, never casually leak your partner's family's private information. When we enter into a marriage, we often view it as the union of two people, two individuals who come together to share their lives. But the reality is much more profound. Marriage is not just about the bond between two individuals. It's about the intertwining of two worlds. When you marry someone, you are not only committing to them but also to their family, their history, and their values. You are accepting their past, present, and the complex relationships they share with their loved ones. This means that, in addition to the personal matters of your partner, you also inherit the responsibility of safeguarding the delicate fabric of their family's life. Protecting their family's privacy is not just an act of respect, it is a gesture of love and loyalty. It is also a form of self-protection because when you hurt your partner's family, you hurt your relationship. Keeping private matters between families is a deeply meaningful way to express your respect for your partner. It may not always seem like a big deal, especially when it comes to sharing small details with a friend or family member, but the implications of such actions can be more damaging than we realize. When we fail to protect the privacy of our partner's family, we expose not just personal information but the very fabric of their trust. It can have long-lasting consequences for both your relationship and your standing with your family. Let me share an example that speaks to this, something that still sticks with me. Imagine a man, let's call him Kenji, who achieved success in his life quite quickly. Many would say that he was fortunate, and in some ways, that was true. He had the drive, the vision, and the determination to achieve his goals. But the truth behind his success wasn't only his own doing. Kenji had an incredible support system in his wife's family, particularly her father, who was not just a father-in-law but also a mentor and friend. This man had always been generous, always willing to help whenever Kenji needed it, whether in the form of advice, financial assistance, or the occasional helping hand in a tough spot. Kenji's accomplishments were undoubtedly his, but they were also shared by those who stood behind him and supported him through thick and thin. However, despite all of this support, Kenji's younger brother, Taro, did not see it that way. Taro was struggling to find his footing in life, and he could not help but feel a sense of resentment as he watched his brother's rapid rise to success. One day, Taro found himself in a similar situation where he needed help, a financial boost, to be specific. He turned to his father-in-law, the same man who had helped Kenji so many times before, but this time the help wasn't readily offered. Taro, frustrated and unable to understand the dynamics at play, lashed out. Instead of recognizing the complexities of the situation, perhaps his father-in-law had his reasons or couldn't help at the moment, Taro accused Kenji of being selfish. He publicly criticized his brother, accusing him of only thinking about his success, of exploiting his wife's wealthy family, and of ignoring the needs of others. His words were not only hurtful to Kenji, who had always admired his brother, but also damaged the relationship between the two families, relationships that had been built over years of mutual respect and shared history. This situation may seem extreme, but I believe it perfectly highlights the importance of being careful with what we share about our partner's family. The personal matters of your partner's family are sacred. They are not yours to share, especially not without careful consideration of the consequences. Even if you feel close to your siblings, friends, or other family members, some things should be kept private. What may seem like casual information to you can be perceived in entirely different ways by others. For example, revealing details about your spouse's family background, their financial situation, or the help they've received over the years can easily be misinterpreted. It may seem harmless at the moment, but those details could stir feelings of jealousy, envy, or even resentment in others. Think about it for a second. How would you feel if your partner casually shared personal details about your family with others? Details about your parents' financial status, your siblings' struggles, or any number of sensitive topics. Wouldn't it make you feel exposed, vulnerable, perhaps even betrayed? The same applies to your partner. When you share things that are meant to stay private, it's not just a breach of trust. It's a violation of the family's dignity and privacy. The consequences might not always be immediate, but they can manifest in subtle, destructive ways. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. For example, you might not see the immediate fallout of a conversation where you reveal how your spouse's family helped them get started in business or how their parents gave them financial support during difficult times. But down the road, it could cause unnecessary friction between families. Your partner might feel betrayed, not just by you, but by the very people they trust most in their life, those they love and depend on. And once that trust is broken, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. We all have our struggles and our vulnerabilities. Sometimes we look at others and think they've had it easier, that they've had more help or more support. But we don't see the full picture. We don't know what sacrifices were made, what silent agreements were forged, and what personal struggles were overcome. When we share intimate details about our partner's family life, we're not just revealing information. We're opening doors to judgment and misunderstanding. Would you want your most private struggles, your financial troubles, your family's health issues, or your sacrifices, to be casually shared with others, with no regard for how it might affect your reputation or your relationship with others? Of course not. So why would you treat your partner's family any differently? The privacy of their lives is just as important as your own, and protecting that privacy is a sign of deep respect and love. In the end, think before you speak. Once a word is spoken, it can never be taken back. And once the trust is broken, it can take years to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. What may seem like harmless information to you could be the catalyst for misunderstandings, broken relationships, and unnecessary conflicts. So protect your partner's family. Protect their dignity, their privacy, and their trust, as if it were your own. Not only will it safeguard the peace between both families, but it will also preserve the love and respect you share with your partner. It may cause tension in relationships. And sometimes, the silence we choose to maintain can speak louder than words. In marriage, there are moments when it's better to keep certain things to yourself. Personal matters, especially those deeply rooted in the emotional core of a relationship, don't always need to be discussed. Some things are better left unsaid, not out of selfishness, but out of respect for your spouse. After all, true love isn't just about sharing everything. It's about knowing what to share and when. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius wisely said, "It is better to remain silent about things that need not be said." This advice extends far beyond philosophy. It resonates deeply within the fabric of family life. Not every detail of your personal life needs to be laid bare for others to scrutinize. While some may listen with empathy, others may only compare, envy, or, in the worst cases, use your vulnerability against you. In a family, love should never be conditional, and respect should always come first. To preserve these pillars, it's sometimes necessary to keep certain matters private, safeguarding both your relationship and your peace of mind. Think of it like this. When you choose to keep your partner's matters confidential, you're not just protecting them, you're fostering trust. That sacred trust becomes the glue that binds you together, providing a sense of security amidst the chaos of life. A healthy relationship is built not on transparency alone, but on the ability to respect each other's space and privacy. This, in turn, ensures that misunderstandings are kept at bay and unnecessary conflicts are avoided. After all, not every thought needs to be voiced. Not every feeling needs to be exposed. It's this sense of discretion, of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, that often makes the difference between a lasting, harmonious relationship and one filled with constant friction. And finally, let's reflect on this. Family is meant to be a sanctuary, a place where we feel safe and loved, not a battlefield where wounds are carelessly inflicted. If we aren't careful, the very relationships we cherish can become the ones that hurt us the most. We must protect our families with our lives, shield them from unnecessary pain, and nurture them with understanding, empathy, and love. Now, as I wrap up today's reflection, I want to share with you a tragic story. A story that touches on the reality many of us will face in our old age. Life, in many ways, is like a song, and each note we play is shaped by the decisions we make. Sometimes, it only takes a small misstep to alter the entire melody of our existence. This is a lesson I learned too late. My story is one of bitter regret, misplaced trust, and poor choices that led an elderly father to experience the harshest form of loneliness. The kind that can only come from being abandoned by those you once held closest to your heart. It's a story that will stay with me forever, a warning to those who still have time to listen. For the past few months, I've been living in a small, run-down apartment not far from my grand, beautiful house, the one where my eldest son and his family now reside. This apartment, once my haven of peace, has become a prison of sorrow and regret. I didn't leave by choice, but because I could no longer bear the cold, dismissive attitude of my eldest daughter-in-law. Her words, sharp as daggers, her disdain, and her complete lack of care became unbearable. It broke me. So, I left. I took nothing but my clothes, an old bookshelf, and the hollowed-out days spent with my only companion, my computer. At 73, my life has shrunk to memories, and those memories, instead of bringing me comfort, only deepen the sadness that now defines me. I once had everything. I was a successful man, respected and wealthy. I could provide for my family, I could buy luxury, I could live a life of comfort. But what I couldn't do was see the very thing that mattered the most, my family. I was so wrapped up in my work, my ambitions, and my pleasures, that I became indifferent to the one person who had sacrificed everything for me, my wife. My lack of attention and my selfishness left her feeling unloved, unnoticed, and eventually ill. And when she passed away, the guilt was overwhelming. I was too late to show her the love and appreciation she deserved. I had failed her, and that failure is a wound I will carry for the rest of my days. It is easy to look back and wish for a different path, but the past is unchangeable. The choices we make today shape the lives we lead tomorrow. And while we cannot undo our mistakes, we can learn from them, and perhaps, just perhaps, avoid repeating them in the future. I vowed, with all my heart, to make up for the years I had lost with my children, to make things right for them in the time I had left. The pain of seeing my wife's funeral, the finality of it, drove that promise deeper into my soul. I felt a deep sense of emptiness, like a void that could never be filled. Yet I convinced myself that I still had time to repair the bonds that had frayed over the years. I would make things right. So, when my children, grown up and settled in their own lives, suggested dividing the inheritance, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. After all, these were my children, the ones I had raised with so much love, the ones I had hoped would take care of me when I grew old. How could I deny them their share? My friends, however, told me I was making a mistake. They warned me, with concerned expressions and hushed voices, saying, "You shouldn't do this. If you give them everything, you'll lose your authority. You'll become dependent on them, and that's the last thing you want at your age." Their words lingered in my mind, like a dark cloud hanging over me, but I couldn't shake the thought that my children, each of them with stable jobs and families, would never do anything to harm their old father. Surely, they wouldn't abandon me. I comforted myself with the thought that I had my pension to rely on, that even in the worst-case scenario, I could manage. And so, I pushed aside their warnings, believing that the bond one shared with my children would be enough to keep me safe. I decided, after much thought, to divide all my assets between my 3 children. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. The large house where I had lived for years, the place that held so many memories, both painful and joyful, was transferred to my eldest son. I thought that it was fair. I had worked hard to build this life, and now I was passing on the fruits of that labor. I trusted him, and I thought I had made the right choice. But in hindsight, it was the beginning of everything falling apart. Shortly after, things began to change, and I felt like I was losing my place in the family. My eldest daughter-in-law, who had once been so kind to me, now seemed to regard me with a coldness I couldn't explain. The warm smiles and thoughtful gestures had been replaced by sharp, biting sarcasm. She would throw indirect insults, little jabs that were meant to hurt. I could tell that her every word, every look, was intended to push me out of her life, to make me feel unwanted, unwelcome in the house I had once considered my own. At first, I tried to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase. But it didn't stop. It got worse. The tension in the house was unbearable. It became clear to me that she was intentionally making things uncomfortable, hoping that I would leave. And eventually, I did. With no other option, I moved in with my second son, hoping that his household would offer me some respite, some comfort after everything I had endured. But what I thought would be a haven turned out to be just another illusion. At first, my second son and his wife were polite enough, but their hospitality was fleeting. After a few days, it became clear that they didn't want me there. It was subtle, but it hurt just the same. They never said it outright, but the way they spoke and the way they looked at me made it obvious. It was as if they were giving me a gentle but firm suggestion. The biggest inheritance went to your elder brother, so you should go back to his house. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, seeking shelter with my children, and yet it felt like I was an imposition, a burden they didn't want to bear. So, I turned to my youngest daughter. She had always been the one I had the closest bond with. Surely, she would understand. But her response broke me. She told me that her house was already full. Her in-laws lived there, and there was simply no space for me. She apologized, but it was clear there was no place for me in her life either. My heart sank as I realized that I had nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. I was just a stranger in my own family. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. I returned to my eldest son's house, hoping for some sign of change, but instead, things only got worse. His wife's coldness turned into outright hostility. Every day felt like a battle to get through. She would make snide remarks and passive-aggressive comments that made me feel like I was the cause of all the tension in the house. My eldest son, my flesh and blood, did nothing to stop it. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. Every time I tried to speak up, he would avoid eye contact and find an excuse to leave. It was like I didn't even exist to him anymore. The pain of being ignored by the very son I had raised was something I couldn't bear. And so, one day, I realized that I couldn't take it any longer. I packed a small bag of belongings, just the essentials, and moved into a small, inexpensive apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The apartment was cold and impersonal, and it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I could barely afford to eat out every day, and when I got sick, there was no one to care for me. I would buy medicine and try to cook, but even that was hard. The loneliness was suffocating. I felt weak, physically and emotionally, and I could feel the weight of my mortality pressing down on me. When I fall ill now, there's no one to bring me soup or comfort me. I am alone with my pain, and I often lie in bed, tears streaming down my face, asking myself the same question. Will I die here, in this tiny apartment, forgotten by the children I once loved so deeply? Will they ever realize how much I've sacrificed for them? Or have they already forgotten me? I can't help but wonder. Did I bring this upon myself? Have my children become unhappy because of my actions, my mistakes? Or is this my punishment for the years I spent focused on work and neglecting the needs of my family? Have I truly failed them, or is this just the natural consequence of a life lived in pursuit of the wrong things? I still ask myself these questions every single day. I question my own decisions, my worth as a father, and whether I am truly receiving what I deserve. I wonder if my children even remember the sacrifices I made for them, or if they simply see me as an inconvenience now, a burden they'd rather forget. My heart aches with the weight of regret, and I can't shake the feeling that I've lost everything. In this apartment, in this loneliness, I often lie awake at night, wondering where I went wrong. Did I deserve this? Did I give enough? Or was I too wrapped up in my pride and ambition to notice that my children were slipping away from me? My life, once filled with purpose and joy, now feels like an endless cycle of mistakes and missed opportunities. I long for the love and warmth of family, but it feels like a distant memory now, something I can never quite reach again. As we reach the end of this heartfelt story, we can't help but reflect on the painful lessons of family, sacrifice, and the pursuit of balance in life. From the choices made to the moments of regret, we've witnessed the deeply emotional journey of a father who sought to do right by his children, only to find himself lost and alone in his later years. It raises important questions about relationships, the value of time spent with loved ones, and the true meaning of giving. So, what have you learned from this story? Do you see your family dynamics in a new light? Have you considered the importance of nurturing relationships before it's too late? I invite you to share one thing you've learned and how you plan to apply it in your own life. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your reflections. If this video resonated with you, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content that touches on life's most meaningful lessons. Thank you for watching, and remember to cherish the people who matter most.